Don't you move. I don't care who you think you are. You don't tell me how to do my job.
A federal judge. You are out of line and you have no authority.
Authority? I am the authority out here. Badge beats robe every time. Turn around. Hands behind your back.
At 9:14 a.m. on a quiet Sunday morning in Bethesda, Maryland, a black Chevrolet Suburban with federal plates came to a hard stop in front of a two-story colonial home. 4 ICE agents in tactical vests jumped out before the engine had fully settled. The lead agent, Craig Pollard, 43, moved fast up the driveway, eyes locked on a black woman loading 2 children into a silver sedan. A girl, 11, clutching a Bible. A boy, 8, adjusting his clip-on tie. They were dressed for church. She was Federal Judge Denise Ibarra-Osei, a sitting United States District Court judge appointed by presidential nomination and confirmed by the Senate. But to Pollard, none of that mattered. What he saw was a black woman in a nice neighborhood, and what he had already decided before his boots touched the driveway was that she didn't belong. "Ma'am, stop what you're doing. Identify yourself." She turned calmly. "I'm Judge Denise Ibarra-Osei, United States District Court. This is my home."
Who are you and what is the purpose of this visit? We have reason to believe an undocumented individual is harboring at this address. Step away from the vehicle. Do you have a warrant? Pollard smirked. "We don't need one, ma'am. Exigent circumstances." That is legally incorrect, and I say that as someone who rules on Fourth Amendment cases. Pollard stepped closer. "Sure you are." Behind her, both children began to cry. And what none of them knew was that every second of what was about to happen was already being recorded. A neighbor's Ring doorbell had activated the moment the Suburban pulled up. A dash cam 2 houses down was running on loop, and a jogger at the end of the block was holding up his phone, recording video that within 48 hours would be seen by millions. To understand the full weight of what those agents did on that driveway, you have to understand who they did it to. Denise Ibarra-Osei was born in Baltimore, the daughter of a Nigerian immigrant father who spent 30 years as a professor of political science at Morgan State University, and a black American mother who was a public school principal for nearly 2 decades. She graduated top of her class at Howard University School of Law, where professors later described her as the kind of student who didn't just study the law, but understood its architecture. She clerked for a Fourth Circuit judge, then spent a decade as a federal prosecutor, building a record described internally as relentless but fair. At 39, she was nominated to the United States District Court. Her Senate confirmation lasted less than 2 hours. No objections were raised. For 8 years, she presided over complex civil rights cases, immigration disputes, and federal criminal trials, with a reputation for precision, fairness, and an absolute intolerance for anyone who tried to cut corners with the Constitution. She lived modestly. She drove the same car for 6 years. She attended the same church every Sunday. She mentored young people in her community and had never once used her title to seek special treatment. Her entire life had been built on one principle: the law applies to everyone equally, and no one, not a defendant, not a corporation, not a government agent, is above it. And now, standing on her own driveway with her children crying behind her, she was about to find out whether the system she had dedicated her life to would apply that same principle to her. Craig Pollard had been in federal law enforcement for 16 years, and in that time, he had built a reputation that depended entirely on who you asked. To his supervisors, he was a high-output agent. Aggressive, yes, but effective. His arrest numbers were consistently among the highest in the region. To the families he had raided, he was something else entirely. Pollard had started in customs before transferring to ICE after a series of internal complaints about aggressive overreach that his previous department quietly wanted off their books. The transfer was lateral, no discipline, no flag in his file, just a fresh start in a new agency that rewarded exactly the kind of behavior his old one was tired of defending. He ran what colleagues called cowboy operations: minimal paperwork, no advance coordination with local law enforcement, maximum intimidation at the door.
At least 9 formal complaints had been filed against him by Latino and Black families, alleging unlawful entry, racial profiling, and physical intimidation during raids. Every single one had been dismissed internally. His partner, Agent Bryce Kellerman, 36, had been with ICE for 8 years and had spent most of them one step behind Pollard. Kellerman never questioned an order, never challenged a call, never filed a report that contradicted his lead.
He was the kind of agent who treated loyalty as a substitute for judgment. Behind them stood 2 junior agents, Fiona Hurst, 27, and Sam Odom, 25, both less than 2 years on the job. Neither had been briefed on the operation beyond an address and a vague instruction from Pollard to stay sharp and follow his lead. Both would later testify that something felt wrong the moment they pulled onto that street. But on that driveway, standing behind a senior agent with 16 years and a record their supervisors had never questioned, neither one said a word. Back on the driveway, the situation was escalating in exactly the way Pollard wanted and exactly the way the law did not allow. Judge Ibarra Osei had not moved from her position beside the car. Her children were behind her. Her voice had not risen. "I am asking you again, do you have a warrant authorizing entry or detention at this address?" Pollard's jaw tightened. "I already told you, ma'am, exigent circumstances. We have credible information that an undocumented individual is inside this residence. And I am telling you, as a federal judge who rules on exactly these matters, that nothing about this situation meets the legal threshold for exigent circumstances. You have no warrant. You have no verified threat. You have no right to detain me or enter my home." Pollard's face flushed. He shifted his weight forward. "You're obstructing a federal operation. I am exercising my constitutional rights, and I am now asking for your supervising officer's name and badge number." That was the moment Pollard lost whatever thin claim to procedure he had left. He turned to Kellerman and gave a short nod. Kellerman stepped forward and grabbed the judge's left arm just above the elbow. Hard. Her 11-year-old daughter screamed from the back seat of the car. Her 8-year-old son bolted from the other side and ran toward his mother. Agent Odom, following Pollard's lead without thinking, stepped into the boy's path and physically blocked him with an outstretched arm. The child stumbled and fell onto the driveway. Across the street, a front door opened, then another. Neighbors stepped onto porches and lawns, some still in robes, some already holding phones. The jogger at the end of the block had not moved. His phone was still recording. Within the next 90 seconds, at least 6 additional cameras would be pointed at that driveway, and not one of them would miss what came next. Pollard pointed at the ground. "Turn around. Put your hands behind your back." Judge Ibarra Osei did not move. She did not raise her voice. She did not resist physically. She stood on her own driveway in her church dress with her 2 children watching from the car and spoke clearly enough for every camera within range to capture every word. "I am Judge Denise Ibarra Osei of the United States District Court. You have no warrant." "I am not the subject of any order. You are making an unlawful arrest." Pollard grabbed her shoulder, turned her around, and locked the handcuffs onto her wrists. The metal clicked twice. Her 11-year-old daughter was sobbing in the back seat, holding up her own phone with shaking hands, recording everything through the window. Her 8-year-old son sat on the driveway where he had fallen, staring at his mother in handcuffs, too shocked to cry. From across the street, a man in a polo shirt and khakis moved quickly toward the scene. He was Colonel Vernon Sharp, United States Marine Corps retired, 34 years of service. He stopped 3 feet from Pollard and spoke with the kind of authority that comes from decades of command. "I am Colonel Vernon Sharp. You are detaining a federal judge without a warrant in front of her minor children. I am ordering you to stop." Kellerman stepped between them. "Back off, sir, right now, or you'll be next." Sharp didn't flinch. "I want your name, your badge number, and your supervisor. I am a witness." Kellerman ignored him. Pollard walked Judge Ibarra Osei to the Suburban, placed his hand on the back of her head, and guided her into the rear seat. The door closed. The children stood on the driveway, alone,
watching the black SUV pull away with their mother inside. No one from that team looked back. The SUV had not reached the end of the block before the neighborhood began to move. Colonel Sharp was on his phone within seconds, calling contacts he had built over 3 decades of military service. A retired JAG officer, a sitting member of the House Armed Services Committee's staff, a former federal prosecutor. Each call lasted less than a minute. Each one ended the same way. This needs to go up now. 2 houses down, a woman named Nina Shelton, a journalist who covered federal courts for the Washington Post, had watched the entire arrest from her kitchen window. She was already texting her editor before the handcuffs clicked shut. Her message was 3 sentences. ICE just arrested a sitting federal judge on her driveway without a warrant. I have visual confirmation her children were present. The editor responded in under a minute. File everything. Across the street, the neighbor whose Ring doorbell had captured the suburban's arrival pulled the footage, backed it up to 2 separate cloud accounts, and sent a copy to his attorney. The jogger at the end of the block uploaded his phone video, sent it to 3 contacts, and posted nothing publicly. Not yet. Everyone in that neighborhood understood the same thing without saying it. Preserve everything before anyone with authority can try to make it disappear. A family attorney 4 doors down called the judge's husband, Dr. Solomon Ibarra Osei, a cardiologist at Johns Hopkins, who was mid-shift when the call came. He left the hospital immediately. Someone called the children's grandmother, Loretta, who arrived in under 20 minutes and found both children sitting on the front steps, the girl still holding her phone, the boy still in his church tie, neither one speaking. By the time the Suburban reached the processing facility, a network of witnesses, recordings, and phone calls was already in motion, and not a single frame of what had happened was going to disappear. The inside of the Suburban smelled like stale coffee and vinyl. Judge Ibarra Osei sat in the back seat, hands cuffed behind her, posture straight, eyes forward. She said nothing. The dash cam, mounted just below the rearview mirror, recorded everything, including the conversation in the front seat that Pollard and Kellerman apparently forgot was being captured. "Everybody's a judge now," Pollard said, glancing in the mirror. Kellerman laughed. "She'll calm down once she's in the system. They always do." The drive to the regional ICE processing facility took 22 minutes. When they arrived, Judge Ibarra Osei was walked through a side entrance, photographed against a gray wall, fingerprinted on a digital scanner, and handed a plastic wristband with a barcode. No phone call, no opportunity to contact an attorney, no explanation of charges because there were none. She was placed in a holding cell with 11 other detainees, mothers holding toddlers, an elderly man sitting on the floor because there were not enough benches, 2 teenage girls who had been separated from their family during a raid that morning. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Judge Ibarra Osei sat down beside a young woman, no older than 22, who was shaking and crying quietly. The judge spoke to her in a low, steady voice. She explained what the woman's rights were. She explained what they could and could not legally do. She told her not to sign anything without representation. For over 3 hours, no one came. Then a processing clerk, running a routine database check on the detainees, entered the judge's name into the federal system. The screen filled instantly. United States District Court. Article 3 Judicial Officer. Senate confirmed. Active status. The clerk stared at the monitor. Then his face drained of color. The clerk stood up from his desk and walked directly to the facility supervisor's office. He didn't knock. Within 4 minutes, the supervisor was on the phone with the regional ICE director, a man who had spent 20 years in federal service and had never heard panic in a subordinate's voice until that morning. "You're telling me we have a sitting federal judge in a holding cell right now?" "Yes, sir. Processed, fingerprinted, and held for over 3 hours without a phone call." The regional director hung up and dialed Washington. Meanwhile, on the outside, the calls were already moving faster. Dr. Solomon Ibarra Osei had left Johns Hopkins and driven straight to the home of Chief Judge Lenora Fairbanks of the United States District Court. Fairbanks, 62, a 19-year veteran of the federal bench, listened for less than 2 minutes before picking up her phone. Her first call was to the United States Marshals Service, the agency responsible for the protection of all federal judges. The reaction was immediate and furious. One of their protectees had been seized from her own home without a warrant, without notification, without any coordination with the marshals, and was currently sitting in an ICE processing cell. Her second call was to the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. Her third was to the Deputy Attorney General's office. Within 90 minutes of the arrest, calls were reaching congressional staffers, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and at least 2 senior officials at the Department of Homeland Security who had not been informed of any operation in that neighborhood. The machinery of federal power, slow to start but impossible to stop once it moves, had begun grinding toward Craig Pollard and every person in his chain of command, and none of them had any idea what was coming. At 1:01 p.m., 3 hours and 47 minutes after she was handcuffed on her own driveway, Judge Denise Ibarra-Osei was released from the ICE processing facility. No charges were filed. No explanation was given. No one apologized. A facility supervisor walked her to the front entrance, handed her a plastic bag containing her purse and keys, and said nothing. Waiting outside was a black sedan from the United States Marshal Service. 2 deputy marshals drove her home in silence. When the car turned onto her street, she saw her husband first. Dr. Solomon Ibarra-Osei was standing at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, jaw tight, watching every car that passed. Colonel Sharp stood beside him. Nina Shelton, the Post journalist, was on her porch across the street, phone in hand. The judge stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the house. Her mother, Loretta, met her at the front door with both children. Her son pressed his face into her side and held on. Her daughter, still in her church dress, eyes swollen, reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She held it up to her mother. "I recorded it, Mama. All of it." The judge took the phone. The footage was shaky. The audio was streaked with the sound of a child sobbing, but the image was perfectly clear. Her own handcuffing, captured from the back seat of her own car by her own 11-year-old daughter. She watched it once, then handed the phone back. She held both children for a long time. No one on that driveway spoke. When she finally looked up, she turned to her husband and said one sentence. "I want every piece of evidence preserved, every frame, every second." Solomon nodded. "It already is." Within 48 hours, the footage was everywhere. The Ring doorbell video showed the Suburban's arrival, the agents rushing up the driveway, and the judge calmly identifying herself before being ignored. The jogger's recording captured Kellerman grabbing her arm, the daughter's scream, and the 8-year-old boy falling to the pavement after Odom blocked his path. The daughter's video, shaky and tear-streaked, showed the handcuffs going on from 3 feet away. A second neighbor's security camera caught the children standing alone on the driveway as the SUV pulled away. Compiled together, the videos showed the full timeline. The approach, the refusal to produce a warrant, the grab, the cuffing, the children's terror, and the dashcam audio, obtained through an emergency federal records request, delivered Pollard's own voice. Everybody's a judge now. She'll calm down once she's in the system. The Washington Post published first. The headline read, "ICE agents arrest sitting federal judge on her own driveway without a warrant. Her children watched." The article included 3 embedded videos and a statement from Chief Judge Lenora Fairbanks calling the arrest a profound violation of judicial independence and constitutional rights. Cable news ran the footage on loop for 72 straight hours. Legal scholars called it one of the most egregious Fourth Amendment violations captured on video. Former federal judges issued joint statements. Members of Congress demanded immediate hearings. Civil rights organizations filed emergency motions. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, announced involvement within 24 hours. And at the highest level of the federal judiciary, a private briefing was delivered to the Chief Justice of the United States. The videos had not just gone viral, they had gone institutional. And the weight of every branch of the federal government was now pointed directly at 4 agents who had decided, on a Sunday morning, that a black woman in a nice neighborhood could not possibly be who she said she was.
By Monday morning, ICE leadership was in full crisis. Pollard and Kellerman were placed on immediate unpaid suspension, credentials seized, firearms collected, facility access revoked. The internal review that followed did not take long to reach its first finding, and it was devastating. There was no warrant for the Ibarra Osei address. There had never been one. The tip Pollard cited in his field report referenced a house 3 blocks away with a completely different street number. He had gone to the wrong address. Not because of a clerical error or a system glitch, but because he had not verified the information before rolling out. He had loaded 4 agents into a federal vehicle, driven into a residential neighborhood, and executed a raid on a home that had no connection whatsoever to any active investigation. The deeper ICE investigators dug, the worse it got. A pattern emerged across Pollard's operational history, raid after raid in predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods, each one justified by exigent circumstances, claims that were vague, unverified, or entirely fabricated. His prior 9 complaints, all previously dismissed, were reopened. Kellerman's personnel file showed that he had co-signed every single one of Pollard's questionable operations without conducting independent verification on any of them. Not once in 8 years had he challenged a target address, questioned a missing warrant, or flagged a procedural shortcut. The 2 junior agents, Fiona Hurst and Sam Odom, cooperated fully with investigators. Both provided sworn statements under oath detailing a unit culture where questioning Pollard was understood to be career suicide. Hurst testified that she had raised concerns about the lack of a warrant before they left the vehicle that morning. Pollard's response, captured in her written account, was 3 words: "Just follow me." The Department of Justice Office of Inspector General opened a formal investigation within 72 hours. The FBI Civil Rights Division launched a parallel probe the same week. Grand jury subpoenas were issued for Pollard, Kellerman, and 3 of their supervisors who had approved or ignored operations flagged in prior complaints. Pollard was called to testify first. His attorney, a former federal defender with 20 years of experience, advised him in the strongest possible terms to invoke the Fifth Amendment. Pollard refused. He insisted on testifying, convinced that his version of events would hold up, that his years of service and his arrest numbers would speak for themselves. They did not. Under questioning, Pollard contradicted the video evidence multiple times. He claimed the judge had been aggressive and uncooperative. The footage showed her standing still, with her hands visible, speaking in a calm and measured tone. He claimed he had announced the warrant authority before approaching. The Ring doorbell audio captured no such announcement. He claimed the children were never in distress. The daughter's recording showed an 8-year-old boy on the pavement and an 11-year-old girl sobbing behind a car window. Kellerman, called in the following week, did not last 10 minutes. Faced with the dashcam footage, the compiled video timeline, and the internal review confirming there had never been a warrant for that address, he broke. He admitted under oath that they had no warrant, no verified tip for that home, and no valid exigent circumstances. When pressed on how the address was selected, Kellerman said that Pollard chose the house based on what he described as the neighborhood profile. Federal prosecutors then played the dashcam audio for the grand jury. Pollard's own voice filled the room. "Everybody's a judge now. She'll calm down once she's in the system." No one in that room needed to hear anything else. 3 weeks after her release, Judge Ibarra Osei retained attorney Vivian St. Clair of the Constitutional Defense Alliance, one of the most respected civil rights litigators in the country. St. Clair had spent 22 years building a record of landmark cases against federal agencies and had never lost a case she took to trial.
She reviewed the evidence in less than a day and told the judge the same thing every attorney who saw the footage already knew. This case was airtight. The federal civil rights lawsuit was filed in the United States District Court and named Craig Pollard, Bryce Kellerman, the Regional ICE Field Office, and the Department of Homeland Security as defendants. The suit alleged unlawful arrest, racial profiling, Fourth Amendment violations, emotional distress inflicted on minor children, and a systemic pattern of unchecked racial bias within the unit. The discovery phase produced what St. Clair later called the worst internal communications she had ever seen in a federal agency. Depositions revealed emails between agents in Pollard's unit containing racist jokes about black homeowners in affluent neighborhoods. Text messages between Pollard and Kellerman referred to black residents in the areas they patrolled using slurs. One message from Pollard, sent 3 days before the arrest, read, "Half these people in these houses don't belong there anyway." Kellerman had responded with a laughing emoji. The messages were entered into the record alongside the video evidence, the dashcam audio, the internal review confirming the wrong address, and the sworn statements from Hearst and Odom describing years of unchallenged misconduct. Government attorneys reviewed the totality of the evidence and made a decision that surprised no one who had seen it. They pushed for a settlement before trial. The case was never going to survive a courtroom. Not with that footage. Not with those messages. Not with the judge's 11-year-old daughter on the witness list. The criminal proceedings moved first. A federal grand jury returned indictments against both agents. Craig Pollard was charged with deprivation of rights under color of law and making false statements to federal investigators. He went to trial still believing his record would protect him. It did not. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Pollard was sentenced to 42 months in federal prison. The judge who delivered the sentence noted that Pollard had shown no remorse and had repeatedly contradicted video evidence under oath, calling his testimony an insult to the court and to the public trust placed in federal officers. Kellerman pleaded guilty to a lesser charge before his trial date. He was sentenced to 18 months. Both men were permanently barred from holding any law enforcement position at the federal, state, or local level for the rest of their lives. The civil settlement followed. The Department of Homeland Security agreed to pay $4.6 million to the Ibarra-Osei family, one of the largest individual payouts in an ICE misconduct case in the agency's history. The regional ICE director, who had overseen the unit and ignored years of complaints, was forced to resign. DHS announced a mandatory overhaul of warrant verification protocols and the creation of a new independent review board required to authorize all residential raid operations before agents could leave the building. The junior agents, Fiona Hearst and Sam Odom, were fully cleared by every investigation. Both were later cited in a DHS internal memo as examples of how cooperation and honesty from within can break cycles of institutional abuse. Hearst was promoted within a year. Odom transferred to a new unit and requested assignment to community liaison operations. Neither one ever worked under an agent like Pollard again. 6 months later, Judge Denise Ibarra-Osei returned to her bench. Her first case back was an immigration matter. A family facing deportation proceedings represented by a legal aid attorney, standing before a federal judge who now understood their fear in a way she never could have before. She presided with the same precision, the same fairness, and the same composure she had carried her entire career. Nothing about her rulings changed. Everything about their weight did. Her daughter, now 12, wrote an essay for her 7th grade English class titled "What Justice Means." The essay described a Sunday morning, a church dress, a pair of handcuffs, and a mother who never raised her voice. It was selected for a regional writing competition, then picked up by a national magazine, where it was published in full. The final line read, "Justice is not what happens in the courtroom. Justice is what's supposed to happen on the driveway." The Ibarra-Osei family used a portion of the settlement to establish the Ibarra-Osei Legal Defense Fund, providing free legal representation to families targeted by unlawful immigration enforcement who could not afford attorneys. In its first year, the fund took on 34 cases. Colonel Vernon Sharp, Nina Shelton, and the neighbors who had preserved the footage and stood watch on that Sunday morning were honored by the local NAACP chapter at a ceremony the judge attended but did not speak at. She sat in the second row, between her children, and listened. On a Monday morning, 8 months after the arrest, Judge Ibarra Osei walked up the stone steps of the federal courthouse. Her children watched from the car as she climbed. No one stopped her. No one questioned whether she belonged. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep.
And speaking of sleep, a lot of you have told me you're waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. and just lying there, can't shut your mind off, and the next day you're dragging through everything. I came across a simple 21-day sleep guide that's helped thousands of people fix exactly that. No pills, no apps, no gadgets, just a step-by-step plan that actually works. It's only $15. I put the link in the description if you want to check it out. All right, I'll catch you in the next one.